JayZ is once again fighting back against attorney Tony Buzbee, who represented a woman that accused the rapper of rape, only for that lawsuit to be dismissed. Well, now JayZ is continuing his own lawsuit against Tony Buzbee and is fighting the lawyer's attempt to get this case thrown out. We have a new major filing that we're going to talk about and a declaration, a sworn statement from JayZ.
Something is off right now, and people can feel it. Not in a loud, obvious way at first, but in that slow, creeping way where timelines start shifting, conversations start overlapping.
When she was just 13 years old. I said up until recently because Buzbee just voluntarily dismissed that case last week. Not entirely clear the reasoning, but what is clear is JayZ and his legal team, they were pushing back on a number of her claims, particularly after an investigation from NBC uncovered potential holes in her story, from her father saying he doesn't recall picking her up after this alleged attack, to perhaps issues with her recall regarding the presence of a jumbotron outside of the Radio City Music Hall, where she says she was picked up and then taken to this party where she was abused, or the fact that there might have been issues with her recollection about talking to Benji Madden at this after party. So again, a lot of issues in her story. Not sure if that's the reason that this case was ultimately dismissed, or maybe, as I said before in a prior sidebar, maybe she didn't want to be part of this litigation anymore. Maybe she didn't want to go through it, having a spotlight on her claims. Whatever the case may be, this case was dismissed. And because of those apparent inconsistencies or issues, JayZ and his team, they petitioned the court to sanction Tony Buzbee for essentially starting a litigation without, what they claim, fully doing the proper due diligence into her claims. And now this leads me into what I want to talk about today. The fact that JayZ has separately filed a lawsuit against Tony Buzbee and his firm. They're suing for defamation, extortion, intentional infliction of emotional distress, essentially arguing that Buzbee made false allegations against him that hurt his reputation and business, and that he initially tried to blackmail the rapper into paying up before going public with Jane Doe's claims. This is a lawsuit we've talked about before, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about it, but these are the essential allegations. Now, what do we want to talk about here? Well, something that we haven't talked about yet. Before that dismissal from last week, JayZ filed a very important motion that we want to talk about that maybe was possibly strengthened by the dismissal of Jane Doe's lawsuit. This is a response. Actually, it's more of an opposition to Tony Buzbee's attempt to dismiss this lawsuit. You see, Tony Buzbee had essentially tried to dismiss this lawsuit against him and his firm through California's anti-SLAPP law. What's that? Anti-strategic lawsuits against public participation. So under the law, certain lawsuits can be dismissed if they are just an attempt to chill someone's First Amendment right to free speech. In other words, there shouldn't be lawsuits where the main intention is to silence criticism, right? Makes sense. That's what JayZ claims Tony Buzbee was going for here, trying to get the rapper's suit against him tossed on anti-SLAPP grounds, okay? Now, Sean Carter, JayZ, argued in his opposition, that doesn't work here, doesn't apply. Quote, plaintiff Sean Carter has filed well-pleaded claims against defendants Anthony Buzbee and the Buzbee law firm for civil extortion, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The amended complaint alleges, and there is no dispute, that right after Sean Combs was charged with drugging and raping men, women, and children who attended his parties, Buzbee launched a nationwide publicity campaign to attract Combs' victims as his clients. Buzbee claimed that other high-profile entertainers had participated in Combs' criminal acts and threatened to expose and pursue criminal proceedings against them. Now, this is referring, of course, to the fact that Tony Buzbee held now an infamous press conference announcing his plans to file multiple lawsuits on behalf of multiple Sean Combs accusers, which he has done. And Combs, of course, is subject to a myriad of sexual assault lawsuits.
And suddenly the same topic is everywhere, whether you were looking for it or not. It begins with a recording. Alleged, unverified, dropped without warning. No build-up, no explanation, just a piece of audio making its way into the public space. And within minutes, everything starts to change. At first, it's just curiosity. People clicking, listening, replaying, trying to understand what they're hearing. But then that curiosity turns into something heavier. Because the tone of that recording, it doesn't feel normal. It doesn't feel like something that was meant to be heard. And that's what pulls people in deeper. You can hear it in the way people react, not just what they're saying, but how they're saying it. There's tension, hesitation, that moment where someone types a comment, deletes it, then types it again differently. Because nobody wants to be wrong. But nobody wants to stay silent either. And then it happens.
Is the extortion claim that we're going to get into, but he continues, and this is important. Quote, the key issue raised by Busby's motion is whether he can wrap himself in California's litigation privilege by claiming that his public and private threats to Mr. Carter were lawful acts in aid of potential litigation. He cannot. Now, litigation privilege, generally speaking, is the concept that you can't sue lawyers for statements they make in connection with litigation. I mean, if you think about it, if there wasn't that protection, then there would be really no lawsuits, right? Any defendant in a lawsuit would turn around and sue opposing counsel. Of course, the other side doesn't agree with allegations. They say they're false. That's every lawsuit. That's the point of a lawsuit. One side makes claims, the other denies it, and you fight it out in court. You can't be liable for statements that you make in connection with the case. Otherwise, again, it would chill litigation. However, according to JayZ and his legal team, this is different. Quote, where Busby crossed the line, and what sets this case apart from most pre-litigation threats, is that he not only threatened civil litigation against Mr. Carter if he did not pay his clients, but criminal proceedings and a public spectacle as well. That renders his conduct extortion as a matter of law and bars him from invoking the anti-SLAPP statute. Busby's defense is that he threatened criminal proceedings only in the public statements and didn't repeat them in his demand letters to Mr. Carter. But the law draws no such distinction. Busby's statements must be taken in their entirety, and his demand letters to Mr. Carter must be read in context. To hold otherwise would reward clever extortionists. So now let's expand on all this. JayZ argues that Busby laid the groundwork for his alleged extortion by going public and saying that his firm represents over 120 people who claim they abuse Combs, and that, quote, many other individuals will be implicated, that he would allow his clients to work with authorities, including the FBI, and then he starts representing Jane Doe in her case against him and Combs, and simultaneously JayZ claims that Busby is making these public statements that, the Combs indictment will grow, and that those close to Combs should be prosecuted and put underneath the jail, and those kinds of comments. And that's what he's alleging sets the groundwork for his extortion claim. And then he goes in, more specifically, into the alleged extortion, where he claims that Tony Busby and his firm sent him demand letters before he was named in Jane Doe's lawsuit, before he was revealed as Celebrity A. Quote, on November 5th, defendants privately sent the extortion demands to Mr. Carter on behalf of two clients, Jane Doe and John Doe. The letters accused him of raping both individuals when they were minors. Busby warned that the only way to avoid a public spectacle was for Mr. Carter to provide his clients something of substance in settlement. Busby also threatened to pursue Mr. Carter for supposed crimes that Busby had not even identified on behalf of persons he did not represent, saying, quote, it has been my experience that when someone does this to a victim once, the likelihood is they have done the same or similar things to others. Busby's accusations are categorically false, but the extortion demands, combined with Busby's prior public threats, sent a clear message to Mr. Carter: pay up or face criminal charges and public condemnation. But JayZ claims that instead of caving to these demands, he filed his lawsuit on November 18th against Tony Busby. Actually, I'll tell you, he filed it anonymously at first, and then that's when Busby named JayZ in Jane Doe's complaint. By the way, you heard about John Doe. So far, never been a lawsuit filed by Tony Busby by a John Doe against JayZ regarding sexual assault. That comes up later. We'll talk about it. But he adds in this filing, JayZ, quote, on December 10th, Busby went even further in a statement to TMZ.
Major figures, untouchable levels of influence, get pulled into the center of the storm. Not gradually. Instantly. No warning, no transition, just straight into the spotlight. And once that spotlight hits, it doesn't dim. It intensifies. People start connecting dots that weren't even being looked at before. Old clips resurface. Interviews from years ago suddenly get replayed like they contain hidden messages. Moments that once felt ordinary now feel suspicious. Expressions get analyzed. Words get stretched. Silences get questioned. And just like that, a narrative starts forming. Not because it's confirmed, but because it's being repeated. That's how fast things move now. The recording itself becomes secondary to what people believe it represents. Because now it's not just about what was said. It's about what people think it means. And meaning, that's where
Busby said he's not ruling out filing rape charges with New York authorities. Busby also said that JayZ's rape accuser might take the music mogul's advice and file a criminal complaint against him after slapping him with a civil suit. And then, of course, we know about the NBC reporting that seemed to cast some discrepancies in Jane Doe's account, and then, of course, the case was dismissed. So that's the backstory of it all. Now we're going to get into the law about whether or not Tony Busby is in fact protected by California's anti-SLAPP law. Let me rephrase that. Whether or not, according to JayZ and his legal team, Tony Busby is protected. And according to this filing, it is a two-step process. First, it has to be established that what Busby is being sued for, or what he's being sued in connection with, the statements, are protected activity. That's the first step. The second step is that JayZ would have to show the court that if you take the facts as true, he would win this case. So let's start with step one, where JayZ claims that Busby and his firm can't meet that burden, that there is no protected activity here. Quote, their threats to publicly accuse Mr. Carter of being a child rapist, coupled with their public threats of criminal prosecution, constitute extortion, which is unprotected speech. Extortionate threats dressed up as pre-litigation demand letters are undeserving of the protection of the anti-SLAPP statute. Actually, they define what extortion is in the criminal code. Extortion is the act of obtaining money or property from another through the wrongful use of force or fear. And JayZ argues that Busby's statements leading up to the demand letters, things like the day will come when we will name names other than Sean Combs, and where he warned that his clients would speak to the FBI because they have some very important things to say, and that under the jail comment I mentioned before, all that sets the context of this alleged extortion. And JayZ claims that Busby's subsequent demand letters are a clear form of extortion. Quote, in the context of Busby's public threats to refer his targets to law enforcement and his private threats to hunt for other criminal acts involving parties unrelated to his clients, told Mr. Carter that he should fear a criminal prosecution. Busby continued his public criminal threats, promising to encourage all of his clients to speak to the authorities. These were threats to publicly accuse of rape and to disclose criminal activity against victims who were not even Busby's clients unless Mr. Carter paid his clients substantial sums. That is extortion and beyond the pale of permissible pre-litigation conduct. And JayZ cites case law in support of that, specifically one California case where he explains how a lawyer, in this case, was sued for extortion because of a demand letter that the lawyer apparently sent to the plaintiff on behalf of a woman who claimed that the plaintiff had raped her. And the court said that this was extortion because the lawyer warned that unless plaintiff settles, he would expose information to the IRS and other authorities, that he would uncover additional causes of action against the plaintiff once the lawsuit was filed, and expose information to the media worldwide and expose any violation by plaintiff to the appropriate authorities. And then also that the lawyer threatened to accuse the plaintiff of raping this woman unless the plaintiff paid for her silence. And JayZ's legal team argues that that case is exactly the same thing here, that, quote, Busby did the same. Now, apparently Busby cited cases to defend himself in a prior filing, but JayZ's legal team says
everything gets complicated. One side says the recording raises serious questions that can't be ignored. Another side says it's manipulated, edited, taken out of context to create something that isn't real. And then there's everyone else. Watching. Scrolling. Trying to figure out which version of reality they're supposed to believe. Because both sides sound convincing. Both sides sound confident. And neither side has full proof. That's the space where chaos lives. That gap between this exists and this is confirmed. And right now, that gap is wide open. No official clarity. No direct explanations. Just noise. Loud, constant, overlapping noise. And the longer it stays that way, the more intense everything becomes. Because silence doesn't calm situations like this. It amplifies them. People start interpreting the silence itself. The
judge wants the case to be about the merits, about the claims, about the parties, not about the lawyers. So she dressed down the lawyers at one point about this kind of activity, and it's possible that they have withdrawn the motion because they just don't think the judge is going to really consider it given her predisposition. That's one possibility.
And what's your other possibility?
Well, I have two other possibilities, and there could be a mix of the three. The second possibility that occurred to me is for some reason, the people who brought the motion, and that's the Quinn Emanuel firm, no longer think the motion is that strong. It's possible they've evaluated things. It's possible, they were claiming that the plaintiffs didn't vet the claims enough and made representations in the complaint that could not have been true. And maybe with further analysis, they've come to a view that the allegations in the complaint are not so demonstrably false that you could prevail on a motion for sanctions. Remember, a motion for sanctions is really hard to win on. I mean, they're very infrequently granted, especially in a contentious case like this. So I wouldn't have expected it to be granted anyway. So the second possibility is that Quinn Emanuel just decided it's not the best motion. It's not our best. We have a separate motion to dismiss the complaint against our client. That's the motion that we want to see through. That's the motion we want the judge to focus on. We want her to focus on the merits and dismiss the claims against our client. We don't care about this sanction stuff. We're going to get it go. And my third theory, which I have no basis for other than sheer speculation, I want to say that up front, is that there's some kind of deal here between the lawyers. The lawyers have accused each other, right? Busby's accused Quinn Emanuel of going after his clients and trying to get them to bring malpractice cases. Quinn Emanuel's gone after Busby and accused him of trying to drum up clients to bring claims against Combs and against JayZ. And maybe the attorneys have reached some sort of understanding about the ground rules. Maybe not, but maybe they have, and letting this motion go is part of that understanding. That would be my third possible reason.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned that it's speculation, but I think by you kind of explaining that, I feel like that might also be very plausible. I want to go back to what you said during kind of your second explanation, where, I'm sure JayZ from his side, he probably wants this lawsuit just to be, or this complaint to be dismissed, or not even amended in the first place, made in the first place. Obviously, nothing goes away in the blink of an eye, excuse me. But in your opinion, watching all of this legal back and forth that's been unfolding these past few months, do you think there is enough to dismiss, or do you think at a point this will even get litigated?
I think it's going to get litigated. If I had to guess, I haven't really studied the complaint against the motion to dismiss, so I don't have a advanced opinion about it. But my reaction to it is that the complaint accuses him of some very bad.
Turn it into a statement. Some see it as avoidance. Others see it as calculation. Some think it means something is being hidden. Others think it means nothing can be said yet. But no matter how it's interpreted, it fuels the conversation. Because now, people aren't just reacting to the recording. They're reacting to the absence of response. And that's when things start spiraling out of control. Because once the internet realizes there's no immediate answer coming, it creates its own. Theories start stacking. Assumptions start spreading. Speculation starts hardening into something that feels real, even when it isn't confirmed. And the more it spreads, the harder it becomes to stop. That's the part people underestimate. It's not the recording that creates the storm. It's the reaction. It's millions of people trying to process something at the same time, each one adding their own interpretation, their own angle, their own belief. And those interpretations collide. They clash. They evolve. Until the original situation almost disappears.
Crazed look in his eyes grabbed her and said, "You are ready to party." Combs then threw plaintiff toward a wall, causing plaintiff to fall. Plaintiff got up and stumbled, at which point Combs grabbed her again and threw her on the bed. At that point, Carter began removing plaintiff's clothes as she grew more and more disoriented. And from there, Jane Doe claims that both JayZ and Sean Combs raped her before she was finally able to get away. Again, Both men have adamantly denied that this happened. Let's talk about what happened last weekend. This was major. Jane Doe apparently spoke with NBC News in an interview that aired last Friday night. And she acknowledged that her story does have some inconsistencies. So Jane Doe was quoted as saying, "I have made some mistakes." She said, though, she stands by her allegations overall, but says since this happened 24 years ago, some details may have been lost to time. But what exactly are those apparent inconsistencies? Well, Jane Doe said that after the alleged rapes, she was able to run away from the home and found a gas station where she was allowed to use the phone, and she said she called her dad to come pick her up. The problem with that is her father told NBC News he didn't remember that, and that if he had come to pick her up, it would have been a 5-hour drive. On top of that, he told NBC News that he never even heard of this alleged attack on his daughter until the reporters came asking questions. Also, Jane Doe claimed that she had spoke to or saw Benji Madden at this VMA's after party. He, of course, is the lead guitarist for the rock band Good Charlotte. But his representatives told NBC News that he was in the Midwest on tour at that time. So with that now coming out, Alex Spiro, this is JayZ's high-powered attorney, sent a letter to the judge calling the allegations a sham. Quote, she claims the assault took place at an after party at Mr. Combs' home, but photos that night show Mr. Combs and Mr. Carter at Lotus nightclub for the after party. When pressed, the plaintiff admitted she was guessing about key details, including the time it took to reach the venue. She admits she has no single corroborating witness over the last 24 years. Now, that's a very good argument. I guess the other argument could be maybe they went to Lotus, but maybe they also went to this other after party as well. Just put that to the side. Now, NBC News did report that they tried to locate a friend who allegedly drove Jane Doe to the VMAs that night, but it appears that person has since died, and they indicated that they tried to reach out to this person's relatives, but no luck. JayZ reportedly told NBC this incident didn't happen, and yet he filed it in court, meaning Tony Buzbee filed it in court and doubled down in the press. And he added, true justice is coming. We fight from victory, not for victory. This was over before it began. This 1-800 lawyer doesn't realize it yet, but soon. So what did Tony Buzbee say in response to all of this? Well, he released a statement defending himself, saying, look, Jane Doe's case was referred to me by another firm where her story had allegedly already been vetted. He wrote, our client remains fiercely adamant that what she has stated is true to the best of her memory. We will continue to vet her claims and collect corroborating data to the extent it exists. Because we've interrogated her intensely, she has even agreed to submit to a polygraph. I've never had a client suggest that before. It's an interesting response. It's almost, in a way, in my opinion, couched
under the weight of everything built on top of it. Now it's not just a recording. It's a full narrative. A story that keeps growing with every post, every reaction, every breakdown video trying to piece it all together. You've got people slowing the audio down, isolating sounds, claiming they hear things others don't. You've got others debunking those claims, pointing out inconsistencies, saying people are reaching back and forth, nonstop. And the audience? They're caught in the middle. Because this isn't something you can just ignore anymore. It's everywhere. Every platform. Every feed. Every conversation somehow loops back to it. And the craziest part is this. Nobody actually knows the full truth. Not yet. But that doesn't stop anyone from acting like they do. That's the reality of moments like this. Certainty becomes optional. Confidence becomes everything. And the louder someone sounds,
a little bit her allegations. And there seems to be, just in my opinion, maybe a little bit of doubt there. So couching where this could go. But for her part, as I said, she's defending herself. This unnamed Jane Doe said to NBC, quote, you should always fight for what happened to you. You should always advocate for yourself and be a voice for yourself. You should never let what somebody else did ruin or run your life. I just hope I can give others the strength to come forward like I came forward. Now, quick sidebar here on this. Two things. One, she is coming forward with a massive lawsuit against two major celebrities. One argument is, would you really do that unless you really thought this happened or really have the evidence to prove this happened? And by the way, that would be really true if she ends up having to identify herself in court, since a lot of the accusers in the civil suits against Sean Combs, they've actually had to identify themselves per the court orders. So it'll be interesting if she has to identify herself and still moves forward with this lawsuit. You know, that might help her credibility. On the other hand, of course it is clear. I mean, look what just happened in the Duke lacrosse case, as we've been talking about. But it could be the case that somebody comes out of the woodwork and files false allegations against celebrities. It's happened before, it's happened in the past. So two competing narratives. Now I want to go back to this because attorney Alex Spiro, JayZ's attorney, has filed an emergency motion, basically asking the court to issue an order demanding that Jane Doe and Tony Buzbee show cause or explain or provide a reason for why this case shouldn't be thrown out or why JayZ shouldn't be dismissed from the lawsuit completely, and for why evidence, at the very least, why evidence shouldn't be preserved in this case. And a memorandum in support of the filing, gives us more detail about what investigators and reporters were able to find out more than 20 years after the alleged assaults happened, and how it seemingly or allegedly contradicts with Jane Doe's lawsuit. So this memorandum reads, plaintiff's unsupported allegations crumble under scrutiny as the evidence and lack thereof reveals glaring inconsistencies and outright impossibilities in her story. Her account describes a jumbotron at the scene of the Video Music Awards, but according to NYPD sources and MTV producers, no such jumbotron existed. MTV applied for a permit to install one, but was denied. She references a house that supposedly fits the description of the location of the alleged assault, but no such house exists. And Spiro also contends that if Buzbee were comfortable putting his name on a story that had such gaping holes in it, then he wouldn't be surprised if Buzbee started destroying evidence. That's a big allegation. But the filing reads, the fundamental inconsistencies in plaintiff's case revealed in the NBC interview, coupled with Buzbee's chronic inability to follow the rules in this case and others, creates a substantial risk that Buzbee will destroy evidence damaging to plaintiff's case, including evidence of his own misconduct, impairing the integrity of the judicial process. An order immediately mandating the preservation of all evidence relevant to this case is necessary to ensure that Mr. Carter has a full and fair opportunity to present his defense against plaintiff's fictitious claims. This memorandum also gives a scathing summary of Buzbee's actions and how Spiro's firm believed that Buzbee had violated what's known as Rule 11. And Rule 11 deals with the expectation that lawyers not file a case for an improper purpose, or that the claims are backed up by the evidence, or they're supported by the law, they're supported by non-frivolous arguments. And if you fail to do that,
the more believable they seem, even if what they're saying is built on nothing solid. That's how narratives take over. Not because they're proven, but because they're repeated, again and again, until they feel undeniable. And once that happens, it's almost impossible to rewind. Because even if the truth eventually comes out, it has to fight against everything people already decided to believe. That's where things get dangerous. Because reputations, perceptions, entire legacies can shift based on something that started as an unverified recording. And by the time clarity arrives, the damage, or the impact, is already done. Right now, we're in that exact moment. That unstable, unpredictable phase where anything can happen next. A statement could drop and change everything. Proof could surface and flip the narrative completely. Or nothing could happen at all, and the speculation just keeps growing until it becomes something even bigger. That uncertainty is what keeps people locked in. Refreshing. Scrolling. Waiting. Because nobody wants to miss the moment where everything finally makes sense. But here's the truth. Sometimes that moment never comes. Sometimes things just fade, leaving behind more questions than answers. But this doesn't feel like one of those times. This feels like it's building towards something. You can see it in the pace, the intensity, the way people are reacting. And that's when it truly takes on a life of its own. So now we're here, in the middle of a storm that started with a single alleged recording. Watching it expand in real time. Watching it pull in more attention, more speculation, more pressure with every passing hour. And waiting. Waiting to see if this collapses under its own weight. Or if it explodes into something that changes everything. Because one thing is certain, this isn't over. Not even close. And whatever comes next? It's going to hit even harder.